Hello and welcome to Tracy Momi Reads. I am back again with another book review. Today, I'm going to be talking about How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. How to Stop Time. I really have enjoyed, the books that I've read by Matt Haig. I think I've only read maybe like 3 or 4. So let's get right into it. There's this guy who he has a condition. Let's call it a condition because he's not like a vampire. There's no actual time travel involved, but he happens to have this condition where he ages incredibly slow. So for every 15 years, he gains 1 year to his life. And when the book goes back in time and it's kind of giving us some backstory about his life, I think it's like the mid to late 1800s or early 1900s perhaps. So he's actually like 400 years old or over 400 years old, but he presents like he's 40. So like I said, it's a 1 to 15 year ratio, the rate of time that passes, as he ages. But it's not even so much about that, as far as his condition. I mean, obviously it's a piece of the story because that he lives it every day, and but I feel like the story was more about his life and all the things that he had done and seen and the people he loved and lost, and what he did with that time, right? And it's just, I think I've talked about this before because this reminded me of another book I read, The God of Endings. And just like in this book, when the authors use actual historical facts and history, things that actually happened, and they weave it into their books and they put their characters into those historical situations and at those historical sites, it is just, if done properly, it really heightens the story and adds to the immersion of the story. And you find yourself like, you're reading a fiction book, but because they've said that this man was sitting down with such and such person, you're like, I wonder if that picture actually exists. Because there was a thing about a picture of him from the 30s that this woman present day had found and saw or whatever. But so in the beginning of the story, we already have, met him present day, and his name, like I said, is Tom. And there is an organization that has been formed for people like him that was started, many decades ago. There's not a lot of them, but there's a society called the Albatross Society, and that's, they call themselves Albas for short. And I think that had something to do with, I think that's a bird or something, and the way that they live for a very long time or something. So that was like their clever name for themselves, albatrosses, but like I said, Alba for short. And they are working hard to keep their identities a secret. So they arrange for people like Tom, who have this affliction, to get new identities and to move around every now and then so that people aren't, people don't recognize them and realize that, hey, I met you, when I was 20, I'm like 70 now, and you still look like you're 30. Like, what's up with that? So they're just trying to keep, everything just on the hush, on the low. They don't want people to find out, because the leader of the Albatross organization, who has been around a whole lot longer than Tom, he is a very paranoid, delusional man. He feels like that there may be some people who do know about them and that they're being hunted and that they want to experiment on them. So that's kind of how he puts out the what do you call it? Not the manifesto, but like the reason for the society is to protect each other so that we can hide from these people. And sometimes they are sent on assignment because maybe there are people that they feel like have, learned about their secret, and they end up like disposing and unaliving these people. But again, that's not so much what the story is about. That's in the background. There's maybe, mention of that in a chapter or two, but mostly we're getting to learn the life that Tom has lived for almost 400 years. And it's very sad. You know, a lot of people may think that immortality would be ideal, but to continue to just lose people over and over that you love, or to be in a world where nobody, you know, remembers what you remember. They don't know what you're talking about, and you just seem so out of place in that era. Because, you know, your memories are still intact, right? Another big part of the story is Tom had married and fell in love with a, you know, a normal woman named Rose, like back in the I want to say early 1900s, and they had a daughter, and he has no idea what happened to his daughter, because he left them to keep them safe, because there were people getting suspicious, like, you know, your wife is aging, your daughter is like, you know, a 8-year-old or a 10-year-old, and you still look like you're 21, you know. So people were noticing, and he didn't want to bring unwanted attention to them, because, you know, back then, anything that people couldn't explain or they didn't understand, it was witchcraft or satanic or whatever, you know, hence the Salem witch trials. And he didn't want any harm coming to them, so he left. And at one point when he returned, it was during the time when, because this was in London, where they spent most of their time, but he's been all over the world. But he came back to check on them. And I want to say maybe 7 years had passed, or a decade had passed. And the plague had infected the town, like literally where they lived. And a lot of people had died. And he went to see, you know, his wife, and she was like telling him, turns out that maybe his daughter may have been like him, and she left as well. And so he has no idea where his daughter is, and it has been like 100 years or more since he's seen her. But he just has this feeling that, yeah, she was like me, and that potentially she's still alive. So in the midst of trying to keep his identity a secret, trying to fit into the modern world, you know, trying to do what the albatrosses need him to do to keep them all safe, this man has been looking for his daughter the entire time. So it's just, there are a lot of moving pieces, but the story is woven together so well that I never felt confused by it. But like I said, I like the historical aspects. I like the past, present points of view, and the idea of immortality. What do you do with all this time, you know, on your hands? And so present day, he's actually back in London, but of course it's hundreds of years since he's been there. But when he got his new assignment, or he got, you know, his new placement rather, he went back to London to be a professor of all things history, because he was actually in some of those places. Not that the people present day know that, but he's been getting these headaches, and it's like said to be attributed to like the memories, you know, because he has so many memories. I mean, think about it, like, if you're like someone who is like 40 or 50 years old, that's like a lot of memories that you have of life. And a lot of them aren't even really crystal clear. Some of them you're probably misremembering. For some people, especially as you age and your brain starts to degenerate, like you can't even maybe remember what happened 2 weeks ago, or what you went in a room for. But his memory is pretty sharp, but the more memories that he's putting in his head, he's trying to remember, right? Because he's back in London and he's seen these things, and he remembers when such and such was there, and I remember playing in a play with Shakespeare, and this is where we used to live. And he's thinking more about his daughter, and you know, it's causing him to have these headaches, and that's one of the things that can be debilitating to someone in his situation. And the more he thinks about it, you know, that's all he cares about at this point. He just wants his daughter, and he's going to stay where he is. You know, he's meeting a community of people, meets a woman who thinks he is very strange, but she's also very intrigued. And life is going well until he gets a call from the organization of albatrosses, and they want, how I said earlier that if people get too close to them or figure out who they are or whatever, they may have to dispose of people, right? But they do that to their own kind as well, because you have people who, just like Tom is beginning to see, they're done with the running. They don't want to hide anymore. They just want to live their lives, and they don't really care what, if somebody notices that they're not aging. But that puts them, they could be a danger to other people like them, right? And so Tom gets a call that he has to come and help them with a situation. And it turns out it's an old friend of his. So that part was interesting too. I just really enjoy how with Matt Haig stories, there's just always like quite literally, when you turn the page, there's something else that's happening. And it's not that he abandons the first storyline, or everything is completed in that chapter. Then we just move on to another decade, or we move on to another day. And like I said, I found the story to be riveting. I could, like Tom's weariness, it was palpable. I mean, that has to just be, I want to live a long enough life to see my children, become full real adults, living on their own with their own families and making sure they're okay. And seeing that with my own eyes, maybe seeing a first grandchild or something. And beyond that, I don't want to be in a lot of pain, when my time comes to leave this earth or leave this realm, or whatever happens when we die. But at the same time, I don't want to become a burden to anyone. The ideal thing, I feel like, would be at the ripe old age of 99 to just close my eyes and just let my weary body just rest eternally. To pass away in your sleep, to have been healthy up until that point, as healthy as a 99-year-old person could be. And then just, because the thing I've learned, as I've gotten older, or not, maybe it's not even a lesson so much as maybe a feeling. I don't know if other older people can relate to this, but a lot of times you do feel totally out of your element. I mean, I want to say, when did the first smartphone, iPhone, come out? It had to be, my daughter was born in 2009 and she wasn't born yet. But it was during a Mother's Day, maybe, that I got my first iPhone, and I think it had been out for a year. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, and I'll put the correct date, but I feel like that maybe it was 2007 or 8 that they came out. So at that point, I was either 37 or 38, depending on the month, right? And I had lived 37, 38 years without that technology, without social media, without any of that. So in is ushered this new technological age. And you have to think about, let's say my mother, or people that were her age at the time, they're in their late 50s, hitting 60, and they've lived their whole lives without all this stuff. And now that is really the only way to function in current society. And you live 60 years without that. You know what I'm saying? So you really feel out of place in that time period, like you're a relic. You're going to be slower at getting things. You may not understand current references, because life is so fast now. Everything is at the touch of the fingers. Everything, you can microwave it, you can get instant things, you can get little entertainment bites in 30 seconds. You can express yourself in 120 characters or less, and it just really makes you feel like, what am I doing here? I'm so out of place, or I feel, like I said, like a relic, so old, I need to be placed in a museum. So I feel like every person has their time on this earth to contribute what they need to contribute, do what they need to do, and then the next generation is ushered in, and then their time is going to come to an end. It's all about evolution, right? So I can't even imagine, that was my long way of saying that I can't even imagine, I don't even want to imagine living 400 years. I mean, you've come from the point where someone you love very much had an ailment that in the present day probably could have been like, cured with a shot or a tablet or a pill or something. And you had to watch these people suffer, So anyway, there are a lot of moments also in the book. I actually got it from Libby, and it was a while back. But because, like I told you, I have a lot of stuff in the pipeline, so I'm just now getting around to a review of it. But I had highlighted so much stuff and about like just aging and time, and there were so many aha moments in this story. I just really found it to be fascinating. And I feel like if you're someone who is, I feel like anybody can enjoy it. Let me stop right there, because I know a lot of people like historical fiction, a lot of people like fantasy, the immortality thing, and stuff like that. So you don't have to be a certain age necessarily to enjoy How to Stop Time. But I feel like people who are older, like if you are at least 40 or older, that it will resonate more with you because you can relate to more of the stuff that is happening. You don't have to like be able to relate to a story for it to be good, but when the story is good and you can relate to it, I think it just adds a whole nother layer to what's going on. And that's how I felt about How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. So, me and that whole topic of aging and things like that, I could go on and on, but I'm going to stop myself because then we'll really be off track. But if you like stories that have past and present points of view, that have historical elements blended in, stories that have some fantastical moments, stories maybe with a little mystery element, I think that How to Stop Time, it checks all those boxes, and it will definitely be a story that you will find worthwhile and entertaining. If you have read How to Stop Time by Matt Haig, let me know in the comments. Am I doing too much? Or was it one of those stories that really, captured your heart and your attention and made you think? Let me know in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure that you like this video, and if you have not subscribed to my channel, go ahead and take the opportunity to do so now. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed. Until next time, enjoy the rest of your week. Bye.